Welcome to the MS Dev Show, episode number 143. This week we talked to Amanda Silver about the massive Visual Studio 2017 release. Background tabs in your browser might start using less power. And did I mention how awesome VS 2017 is turning out to be?
This episode of the MS Dev Show is brought to you by Espose, the market leader of .NET and Java APIs for file business formats. Natively work with DocX, XSLX, PPT, PDF, MSG, MPP, image formats, and many more.
This week we have Amanda Silver, Director of Program Management for Visual Studio, VS Code, and other development tools. How's it going, Amanda?
Pretty good. How are you guys doing?
Great. Okay, Carl, what do we have for the comment of the week?
Well, now with the comment of the week with our new sponsor, Espose, we are reinstituting a giveaway. So the comment this week is from Kyle Helms on Twitter. He said, is the show only 28 minutes? The last episode, we had a little bit of error. We edited the show. It was working great. It sounded great. The video was great. It was the right length for the video. But somehow when we exported as MP3, we missed something and it only got half the episode.
I blame the computer.
So,
this was not
no.
So because of Kyle, we caught it really quick.
Yep.
And some of you guys got the shortened episode. If not, we corrected it right away. We put the full length one up there. So thanks a lot. And you will be the first one to get the Espose Total.net, which includes the Espose.net products, all of them in one package. So thanks again, Kyle, not only for the tip, but for saving our butts. And if you want to get mentioned on the show like Kyle did, send us an email to feedback@msdevshow.com. Comment on Facebook, YouTube, or Stitcher. We really like those 5-star iTunes reviews too.
Perfect. And I know we're not covering a lot of news, but what do we got for our one news story, Carl?
Yeah, Google and all the major web browsers as a whole are trying to make improvements to browsers to save on power consumption. Mm-hmm. And Google's made a little bit of a changes recently for how what happens to your apps when it's put into a background tab. And I saw this when checking out the Thurrott.com, and he points to the original source on the developer Chrome developer forums, mm-hmm. Where it outlines all of the things that happen when your your web app in a tab is put into the background. And if you're a web developer, this is actually pretty big because there are things that happen as soon as 10 seconds after you're put into another tab. So
okay, so you in your code you have to handle that situation when you're in the background, because I know like weird things happen with like timers and things like that, right?
Yep, and you definitely want your JavaScript, if you're expecting it to run, to handle that properly.
Yeah.
Did I mention that one of the things that my team works on is the JavaScript engine?
No.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we're pretty familiar with all these issues.
Perfect. So does that mean like Edge? Do you any clue how that's handled?
So the Chakra engine,
Yeah.
and actually that's kind of that specific thing has really evolved over the last couple of years. Especially as we're thinking about how apps might run in a mobile context or mm-hmm. things like that. Definitely trying to push down the power consumption.
Yeah, and my experience has always been like the default browser, like if you use Edge, for example, your battery life is phenomenal compared to pretty much anything else out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the goal that we have, is to make sure that we have the best browser for Windows. So mm-hmm. Really trying to make sure that Edge sings.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also assuming that this doesn't just cover like the Edge browser, but when we're running JavaScript and in a web application, that could be like a Win.js app as well. When your Windows just in the background behind another one, you're going to get these throttling situations as well.
Yeah, and actually that was one of the first reasons that we started working on all of these things, like, really bringing multi-threaded apps to JavaScript, is because we knew we were going to start running them in app contexts. And about that same time is when web workers started to come out, and now we have, the evolution of that as well. And that's when async started to come out for JavaScript, and all of that kind of happened in the same era.
Yeah.
About 3-4 years ago.
Yeah. Async await in JavaScript is like that. I'm so excited about that.
Yeah.
And then some of the early stuff I could do in TypeScript, and that going into production now is super exciting. We've talked about that a few times on the show. Very,
cool.
very cool stuff. Yeah.
Good.
Okay, so but what we're talking about today that we're super excited about, and I'm sure you are as well, is Visual Studio 2017. This was such, I don't know, when I started, like, even just reading more about some of the things behind the scenes that are going on here, it's just incredible the amount, like how big of an update this is. This is just huge.
It was pretty tremendous. I mean, I would say that it's my baby, but
Yeah.
I just had a baby, and that's why I've been out for the past couple of months. So I would say I had 2 babies this year.
Yeah. Do you get double maternity leave, or is that not how it works?
Yeah, I know, right?
Talk to
But
Sasha about that.
it was an enormous release, just kind
Yeah.
of thinking back to all the different things that we worked on. And a lot of the things were absolutely fundamental to the way that we operate as a team,
Mhm.
that you guys might not see in the product itself.
Mhm.
But there were huge changes that went into the product, and also kind of huge changes that went into how we work as a team as well.
Very cool. Yeah. So, I think a lot of the features too were just reducing or eliminating pain that we had before. And some of that pain we were aware of, and some of it we weren't. I mean, one of them was the installer process. It was always one of these applications that took a long time to install. And I would always kind of lock up whenever I would see all the different options for doing the installer. So I see that that's completely revamped now. So why does it look so different, and how does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, this is really a story around what has happened to Visual Studio over the last few releases. It used to be that Visual Studio was an app for developers to build apps for Windows purely, and that's it. Right. And then along came Azure and web applications. And then eventually we started to allow developers to build for Android and iOS as well. And really what ended up happening in their last release is that, while we brought a tremendous amount of capabilities into Visual Studio for developers, the install actually just got really, really big. And we know from a lot of our telemetry and talking to our users that people tend to either install everything, they kind of checkbox everything that was in the setup, or they just hit next on the wizard and they install the default. And the result was that really nobody was kind of going back and making sure that they were using all the things that they had installed, and they were installing too much for what they actually needed. And so what the result was that we actually ended up with an unsatisfactorily high failure rate in terms of successful installs. And so what we set out to do is to make it so that your Visual Studio can kind of grow with you. If you all of a sudden want to take up Python or R programming or something like that, that you can really easily find out where you can get that set of extensions in Visual Studio. Or if you want to start doing mobile development, you can add that into your tool set as well, but also make it really, really easy for developers who are just building an ASP.NET web application to get the smallest, leanest install that they possibly can.
Yeah. So go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so one of the things that you mentioned is being able to go back later. So one of the things I noticed that in my start menu, there's actually a Visual Studio installer app. So once I click on that installer, it stays around.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, so our goal here is to actually make that somewhat reentrant, because we expect that you are going to add different capabilities over time. Like if you write a mobile application, over time, you're going to probably end up connecting that mobile application to a back end. And it might not be that you start on the service side of building that application, but over time, you're going to end up needing to connect to that service or write a mobile service on the back end. And so rather than kind of going back into add remove programs or something like that, we wanted to make sure that you knew where to go to find the additional functionality that you needed in Visual Studio without forcing you to install all of it up front. So that's kind of one of the main reasons that we did it. But, our vision for what that product experience looks like over time, it will end up being more of a hub for other things as well.
Okay, that's interesting.
So I'm assuming that you made Visual Studio bigger, faster, stronger. So can you tell us what kind of performance improvements you guys did, or what kind of how much faster?
Yeah, well, this really kind of translates, this kind of goes back to what I was talking about in terms of how the team has evolved over the past couple of years. It used to be that it was boxed software. It would take us 2 or 3 years to do the planning and then kind of get to the point where it was ready to be released. And then we'd ship it out the door. And then, there might be a team that was working on uh, service updates for it, but the main team was already working on the next version of the box product. The way that we really operate now is more that we're, even though it still is a rich client application, we think about this as kind of a service that we're providing to developers over time. And so that means that, a lot of the platform updates that will let you target the next version of Windows, the next version of Azure, that ends up being installed as an update or as an out-of-band release into Visual Studio. But in addition to that, we also really monitor the way that the Visual Studio client is performing for all of our users. And that allows us to see what are the top hitting bugs and, where even what's working, what's discoverable for users, what's not discoverable for users, and we can actually augment that over time in subsequent releases. So one of the things that we really looked at in trying to figure out what to do in this release is we started to look at the telemetry information around where were users hitting hangs in the tool or just having generally slow experiences. There's something called Watson. Have you guys ever heard of the term Watson? Yeah. So Watson was originally part of Windows that allowed you to track crashes that happened in Windows, and then we'd get, heaps and stack traces for those crashes, and that allowed us to improve the operating system based on the usage in the wild. Then all of the applications at Microsoft started using this Watson utility, so we could actually see, what kinds of crashes were out there. And then over time, we thought, wow, that's such a great idea. We should apply that to other types of things. And so we introduced something called Perf Watson, which basically looks for hangs from the main UI thread. And what we look for in that is like anything that would show up as it feels like your app is hung. And we tried to focus on those top issues. So, a lot of them we've really taken care of. So, for example, opening a new project, we've really tried to improve that. One of the ways that we improved that is by allowing you to just open a folder and not necessarily have to load all of the solution and project context or do that asynchronously in the background. Another way that we did it is we actually have a feature that we call deferred project load, that will defer loading the projects until you have need for a feature in Visual Studio that has a dependency on that. But then there's other things that we've done. We've improved the speed of typing considerably. And I was just in a meeting this morning where we were discussing usage of the version that we just shipped last week, and we were talking about, hey, this is what the typing performance looks like for users out in the wild, and is there anything we could do even further than what we just released? So there's a whole bunch of different types of performance improvements that we've put into this latest version, and we're not done. We'll continue to work on it.
Okay, there was a lot of stuff in there. So I guess the first big thing, like from my perspective, so we did talk about the installer real quick, but the installer, the Visual Studio being this, I don't know, it's like the Star Destroyers from Star Wars. Like that's kind of how I picture it. Like that made me switch over to VS Code, which I love as well. And I've always used that kind of as now I use it as like my default for opening projects and things like that, because it is so fast.
Yeah.
And now, you're kind of pulling me back over, because now you guys are adding like so many cool features, and I can install this thing. I used to be like afraid to install it on certain systems. I'd like wipe my system and then I'd be like, oh, do I want to put Visual Studio on there? Or can I get by with VS Code? And now it's like, less than a 5-minute install. Okay, I'm going to throw that on there. And depending on the options I pick, it might not take up a whole lot of space. So from my perspective, like that's a huge performance improvement. The startup time feels way faster. And then what's kind of interesting too is, even if we just ignore all those numbers, like you mentioned, there's all these other features in there that really, are instead of saying like, oh, we've improved, project load time by 10%, like this is way more impactful. Like, hey, if you have 100 projects in your solution, instead of taking 10 minutes, we're going to do it in 3 seconds because we're going to delay those things. So that,
Yep.
a lot of that is like way more substantial than these small things that you normally could have done. So that's super exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, but at the same time, we recognize that developers who use our tools spend oftentimes 8 or 10 hours in the tool each day.
Yeah.
And so every step matters in the debugger, or every time you hit IntelliSense, like that matters. So we look at both the huge things that you do that take multiple seconds or even minutes, used to take minutes, and how we can improve those things. But we also look at the really rapid experience that you might interact with in the tool.
Okay. And then one thing that I've tried never to give too much thought to is the fact that there's a version of Visual Studio, then you have a version of .NET, but then you also have a version of C#. I didn't realize that till this podcast when I think it was Mads we were talking to. And and it's like, oh, okay, this is like totally decoupled even from .NET. Like they sort of go together, but
they hopefully dock every once in a while.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so VS 2017 now has C#7 features as well, right? Like you get all that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And TypeScript 2.1, I think. But that's one of the things with all of this. TypeScript actually moves independently from Visual Studio, like C#. Because of the fact that we now have everything really acting as though it's an extension on top of the core Visual Studio platform, all of these things can kind of move separately. So if your team is using a particular version of C# or a particular version of TypeScript, they can adopt the next version kind of when they're ready. But even more importantly, we can actually continue to make progress on the programming languages independently of Visual Studio as well.
Okay, so you're saying like when TypeScript 2.2 ships, then I'll just update my extension. I don't have to get a new version of Visual Studio?
That's right. Yeah.
Awesome. So it's like kind of like how VS Code works then. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Very cool. I'm gonna have to look at that because I've been doing all my TypeScript in VS Code. But like I said, all of the tools and instrumentation you have in Visual Studio is pulling me back in.
Well, that's one of the other cool things that we've done in the JavaScript and TypeScript space over the past release is we actually merged the language service.
Mm-hmm.
So it used to be that we had a JavaScript language service that was execution based, meaning that it actually partially executed the program to get the IntelliSense for you. And that was what our JavaScript experience was based upon. And in this last release, we actually based it on top of the TypeScript compiler. So what's happening is instead of partial execution, we're actually inferring a type system for your JavaScript application, even if you're writing in JavaScript, not TypeScript. And that same language service that powers IntelliSense and powers all of the background compilation is actually the same exact language service that's used in VS Code. So like there's a whole bunch of code sharing in terms of the experiences that we can deliver for VS Code and Visual Studio, even though they look like, very separate user experiences.
Okay, that's great.
So in addition to JavaScript and the main .NET languages, or the languages that we associate with .NET like C# and F#, there's also, I saw, over 20 other additional languages supported in Visual Studio 2017. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so one of the things that we wanted to do is this open folder capability so that you can really take any folder or repo or anything that has some code in it and you can open it and reason about it. And so minimally what we've done is we've made sure that we have colorization and kind of like grammatical checking syntax checking for all of the different types of languages that you might want to use as a developer. So Swift, Go, Rust, Ruby, you name it, a whole bunch of different programming languages. And then kind of depending on either how much we have a dependency on it or how much, we find that users are using it, or or based on how much the community supports it, we might have even better language support in the tool as well. But the idea is that minimally we should have at least colorization and syntax highlighting and colorization for all of those languages, and then some have, you know, like there's maybe a bronze, silver, gold kind of experience depending on the programming language.
I gotcha. And then what about whenever I'm doing debugging in here, because that's obviously such an important experience. It looks like you have a whole bunch of huge improvements on the debugging.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, Visual Studio is really known for its debugging capability.
Yeah.
And one of the most important things with that is in other tools, it's really hard to set up your debugging.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, or if you're using loosely coupled tools with a kind of lightweight editor, it's
like
really
start this
often
thing,
hard.
Attach over here, and then attach this thing that can talk to that, which talks to this. Yeah.
Yeah, and to the point that we were talking about earlier around how the tools are kind of paired oftentimes with the programming language, and then there's a runtime, and all of those things kind of conversion separately. On top of that, there's a debugger, and that debugger actually has to have an understanding of the programming language version that's running and the runtime that the application is running on, because what ends up needing to happen is that you can map the source code to the execution of the program. And so part of what Visual Studio does so well, and this kind of has to do with the setup experience, is we understand how to set up your debugger really well.
Mm-hmm.
So in a lot of ways, even though we've added a ton of capabilities, new capabilities to the core debugger for .NET and for mobile applications, you know, a lot of what Visual Studio does that's kind of the most important job is it sets up your debugger in a hassle-free way.
Yeah. There's even some small things in here that I think are a big deal, like the run to the basically run to this point. I would always set a breakpoint and then I would like unset it, but you know, it's like those small things, like please, you know, continue execution up to this point, reattach the process.
You have no idea how many people we have like studying how developers debug.
Yeah.
In all different contexts.
Yeah.
Like we have tens of, maybe scores of people whose lives are devoted to debugging experiences.
Yeah, and it's one of these things too where like I can't really tell you where I'm feeling the pain right now all the time because I'm so used to it. I've just gotten, you know, you don't know what you don't have, right? And then once you give it to me, it's just like, yes, thank you. You actually are you just saved me like, you know, 30 minutes every day, and I had no idea.
I remember in the early days when I first started working here, which was like in the early days of .NET, you know, we were working on the first version of Edit and Continue, and the you know, the work that was required to go through all of the different combinations of the programming language plus the runtime and say, okay, this is something that you can continue from, this is something that you can't continue from. That was man years worth of work to get that right. And that was version 1. And, you know, we've kind of continued with that goal to really make kind of debugging super easy. Bringing it forward. So like, you know, not only is it core debugging capabilities in terms of the run to click capability that you just talked about earlier, but improving your exception experience so you can go inspect things, making it easier to attach to processes, like, you know, getting perf tips so that you can see kind of how long does it take for a method to run, having better profilers. You know, this time we introduced a new Xamarin profiler so you can profile Android or iOS applications. You know, there's so many things that we've done that I can't even talk about it in this whole radio show were just devoted to debugging improvements. I would fill your time.
We'll just make this like a 10-episode series.
Well, I have 10 other people I can put on your next show.
There we go.
Well, I think it's funny that you talked about you had worked on Edit and Continue years ago, because one of the new features this time is Edit and Continue for XAML.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, definitely. So the team has been working on that for
That's
a couple of
mind-blowing.
years. And a lot of that is actually, we're really um, we've really built up kind of a center of excellence around compilers, programming languages, runtimes, and debuggers, and how all of those things kind of work together. And so, it might be that the XAML team on their own wouldn't have come up with that and continued, but because they're sitting right next to the C# team that has been working with the .NET team and the debugger team on how add and continue can work, they now get the idea of bringing that to XAML.
Yeah.
And so they end up not just borrowing from the user experience and kind of coming up with the right rules, but also using a lot of the same infrastructure from a code perspective. So we've been working on XAML using more and more of the Roslyn infrastructure, for example.
Aspose offers a powerful set of file management APIs with which developers can create applications which can create, open, edit, and save the majority of popular business file formats. Their product range supports a multitude of file formats, including Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoint presentations, PDF documents, OneNote, Outlook, Project, Visio files, popular image formats, and many others. Aspose produces APIs for .NET, Java in the cloud, which can be utilized in almost any modern language available today. Visit www.aspose.com for a free 30-day no limitations trial. And if you get stuck, message the friendly support team for help. All technical support is offered free of charge. Remember, if you're a lucky winner, you will receive a free developer small business license for Aspose.words for .NET, a powerful toolkit to work with Word documents in your applications.
Yeah, so, pivoting a little bit, one of the huge features that I know a lot of people are excited about is the live unit testing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, huh? So the idea, thumbs up. So the idea behind live unit testing, obviously, unit testing is now an essential thing that most developers do. It used to be that testing was maybe somebody in some other room did after you were done with your application, and I can't say that every developer that we talk to does test-driven development or anything like that. Some of them do, but very few of them do that. But I would say that it is pretty typical nowadays for developers to also write the tests for their code. And live unit testing basically makes it easier to kind of take a bunch of the unit tests that you've come up with and run them in the background as you're typing and as you're modifying code, and actually see the results in the context of your editor. So one of the things that we're really trying to do for the vision of Visual Studio is to make it so that you get as much information in context as possible. And what is the context that keeps you in the zone? It's really looking at your code. And so what we've been trying to do over the past couple of years is bring a whole bunch of things like perf tips, unit testing, collaborating with your peers, all of those things, bring them into the context of the editor in such a way that it's not disruptive to the flow of you thinking about what you need to program.
Yeah, and to be specific, you get line by line, it tells you, it's basically code coverage on steroids, because not only does it tell you if it hit that line of code, but it tells you if that line of code was
passed or failed.
I might screw this up. Yeah, it was involved in a failing unit test, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So for each line of code or each method, it'll tell you, for the unit tests that are covering that line of code, are all of them passing? Or is some of them failing, or is it not covered at all? And then if you click on the some of them failing, then it'll actually bring up the test runner UI, so you can actually go and navigate to the specific unit test that's failing.
Yeah, I think that's a big game changer. I think that shows, that really connects the value of the test, right? It's if you have that check mark next to the line of code. That's awesome. I love that, because it's so easy because I was always, I've done unit testing for forever and ever, back in like I think it was like NUnit 1.0 or whatever. But then came along, some of these code coverage tools, and it was always such a hassle to use them. But it was like life altering when you could see what was actually covered. And this just takes it a step further. And then they have this happen live is really crazy. So I haven't played with this in VS 2017 yet, but this is one of the things that I'm actually most excited about for sure.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to ask you, so we did talk about extensibility earlier, but like, how can, like, should I make an extension? Is it difficult? Can even somebody like me do it?
Everybody who can write any small program can write an extension.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we've done is we've really tried to make it so that Visual Studio itself is made out of a series of extensions. Mm-hmm. So, sometimes some client applications, the main functionality is in the core app, and then extensibility is kind of an afterthought. So there's an API and it never versions properly with all of the new features that you have. Well, now, because Visual Studio is based on top of the extensibility surface area that we have itself, mm-hmm. It's super important. It's critical to everything that we do because everything is authored as an extension. And we just kind of package it differently for how you go and access it. And so, I mean, it's really easy. All you have to do is in the installer UI, you just click the Visual Studio extensibility workload, and that will install all of the APIs so that you can basically start writing your own extension for that.
And now also, if I have a bunch of extensions on my dev machine, those now roam if I have another dev machine as well, right?
Yeah. So one of the things that we've been trying to work on over the past couple of years is making it so that the tool is a little bit more aware of who you are and what you like or need to do. And so, I think last version we introduced roaming settings so that you could have like, you have certain colorization or certain tabbing or other things like that in kind of the editor settings. And those settings roamed if you had, let's say, two machines and you signed into another machine, it would pick up your old roaming settings and apply those to your editor. In this version, we introduced the capability to roam your extensions. So it can actually pick up which extensions you had installed on the other machine, and it can go replicate that on your new environment that you just signed into.
Yeah, I'm just playing with Visual Studio right now. I see there's actually an update that came out today.
Yep.
So I'm
so like I said,
now.
I mean, the objective that we have with getting some telemetry from some of our users to understand kind of how it's behaving in the wild is really so that we can provide a good service for everyone. Mm-hmm. So if we're seeing a lot of hits in terms of crashes or kind of functional disappointments.
Mm-hmm. Functional disappointments.
Then we can get an update out super quickly.
You've been doing this for a while. You know what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Okay,
I'm updating Visual Studio. This is a test right now to see how long it takes.
Bugs. It should be pretty quick. Let's hope so. But yeah, so I mean, our hope is that if you installed it last week and you thought you were encountering a whole bunch of bugs, install this new version and hopefully we've addressed them. And if not, then let us know, and hopefully there will be another release out super quickly so that we can address those bugs too.
Yeah, that's pretty responsive. So I wanted to ask about .NET Core, and actually I have sort of a general question just because I haven't been able to stay in. I haven't been able to do as much .NET work recently as I normally do, or I've done historically. So I assume .NET Core support is great in VS 2017, correct? Like that's kind of my first question.
Yeah, I mean, we've been .NET Core has been a labor of love for many people.
Okay.
And I would say that it's we've really wanted to make sure that we got it right. So in terms of really what the opportunity is here is trying to make sure that we have a new version of .NET that is best for all of the different environments that it's going to be used on. It kind of started with the version that we needed to do for Windows and what we wanted to do for a lightweight version that could be hosted in the web. But then additionally, we're also trying to make sure that you can kind of write .NET components that can also be used in a Xamarin context on iOS or Android. So that's kind of where the .NET standard comes from.
Sorry, that was kind of a weird question, but I just wanted to like kind of lay that foundation for my next question, which is, so whenever I'm using this new version of Visual Studio and I want to create, if I'm creating like a new application, should I start with .NET Core? Is this a good time to start with it? And I know this isn't like a .NET Core discussion, because I know .NET Core is great. So we can take that as an assumption that it is great. But if I'm in Visual Studio specifically and I want to create an application, should I start with .NET Core? Is this a great time to do that? Do I get all the tooling support, and am I going to be super happy with that experience?
In terms of the coding experience for .NET Core, it is equal to the coding experiences for any other version of .NET that you might have. I mean, there still are some diagnostics capabilities that we need to bring to the .NET Core runtime. So there might be some things that are on our to-do list that we haven't yet gotten to, but we'll get to over time. But in terms of like the core editing experience and kind of authoring experience for .NET, it should be at parity with the other versions of .NET that you might target.
Yeah, because the conclusion...
why use .NET Core? Because it's basically a lightweight version that's kind of optimized for authoring microservices.
Okay, yeah, because this was really like the remaining like hurdle in my mind. Now we have a good version of .NET Core. It has all these great features. Now we have like a world-class IDE. Now it seems like this is just a great friction-free time to start diving into that for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I did say that it was kind of optimized for microservices, but .NET Core is actually also what powers Windows applications as well for modern Windows applications.
Yeah, my update is already complete, by the way. It actually completed earlier.
That's great.
Yeah, so that was awesome. I remember the days of like the 8-hour SP1.
Yeah, and imagine for us, I mean, we have to install a new build every day to make sure that
yeah, your life probably got way easier here. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
There's also some new functionality for coding standards. How does that work?
So one of the things that we've heard over the past many years is that some teams really like to have either more guidance as they're writing code around like what reads like good code, or they want to have some capability to enforce style rules for their development team. And so what we've introduced in this version is, I think we call the feature code styles, but you can go into the tools options for C#, and there's a whole bunch of different style rules that you can apply. Some are, just very simple like style rules, like use this or don't use this or
like
things like that.
Always use var.
Yeah, always use var or whatever you want, right? Like some of them,
we're gonna get some emails
might
now.
make sense. You can also kind of say, don't ever use var, or I want it to be a warning, or I want it to be an error, or things like that. Yeah. So you can actually set that separately for what you would like.
Yeah, that's pretty huge.
Yeah, so some of these things are style rules like around formatting or how many spaces you want, or if you want to return, or a carriage return, or things like that. And others are kind of more semantic or real checks that could catch some things that could lead to programming errors.
Yeah, I think this will work much better than companies. Like I've seen this at like every company. I think except for, well, I'm sure it happens in Microsoft as well, but every company that I've ever worked with, they always, like somebody takes it upon themselves to come up with this like coding standards, and it goes like in a Word document, and then it's like, hey everybody,
and you have to refer to it.
Go read this Word document I created, and make sure you read it like every day in case I make a change. And it's never did anything. Everybody's like, no, I'm just gonna keep doing my thing. So this is pretty cool because then, like you said, you can make them warnings, or, whatever. And then as they're coding, it's like, oh, okay, I see, maybe I should think about this a little bit more.
Yeah. Especially junior developers who, might not have those standards. They might not have already built up their own code aesthetic.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is also important too for those of us who write for different contexts. Like if I know that Microsoft, when they're writing a code that's going to go out on a thing, you don't use var as often, so people can see that explicit type for certain scenarios. Whereas if you're writing it for more production ready code, you do want to use that. So
yeah, it's like it reminds me of the term code smells.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is all about basically making sure that your code smells good.
Mm-hmm.
And think about it as you get to craft your own perfume.
Oh, that's pretty cool. What else is there anything else that we missed?
Oh geez, let me think.
There's probably like 3 major things that, like
There's
people on your
things.
team are yelling at the podcast right now.
Well, I mean, one of the things that we really tried to work on is, we talked a little bit about some of the editing capabilities, but we've really tried to improve IntelliSense and code navigation and kind of refactoring to make sure that, you have all of the basic necessities in the editor with Visual Studio itself. So that's one thing that's pretty important that we've done. Another thing that we've done is really tried to make, think about how your collaboration with others could be a core part of the Visual Studio experience. So we've introduced, being able to commit and see what pull requests you have going easily in Visual Studio, and you could see kind of like how many changes you have that you need to persist to your source code control. So it's not like a separate window that you need to navigate to. This is all kind of core in the IDE, and it's pretty, what's the word? It doesn't interrupt your code flow.
Yeah.
So it really is just like you're looking at your editor, and then in this tiny little corner at the bottom, you can see how many changes you have to persist. And then the other thing that I think we've put a lot of work into is thinking about cloud development. And there's a couple things there that we've been working on. One is making it easier to write a connected application. So that you can, have something that uses SQL storage or Azure storage or Redis cache or, Azure AD or things like that, making that really easy, kind of in a wizard-like way, as well as connecting to your whole DevOps pipeline and making that super easy.
Oh,
and then with the DevOps pipeline, also thinking about the fact that a lot of cloud developers are using Docker. So we actually make incorporating Docker into your application much easier, so that you don't need to kind of like respin up instances.
So how does that work?
Really, it's like rather than restarting your container, we are Docker aware.
Okay.
So that we can
really cool.
Deploy new instances of the application based on the modifications that you've made to that Docker container.
Oh, this has me so excited. I'm a little distracted because I'm playing with Visual Studio right now. Because I'm setting up like a .NET Core. I have a console application here, and I'm setting up some unit tests. And this is pretty cool because there's been times when like something new like this comes out, and then you try to create unit tests, and things are awkward. And but this is like the experience. This is just the polished experience that I've always expected. And I love it because. Yeah, I mean, I just created a .NET Core application. I set a breakpoint. I hit run. I'm able to step through the code. Like everything works the way that it should. So this is super exciting for me.
Good to hear.
Yeah, I just need to get more chances to write some code now. Okay, anything else? Should we move on? I think we covered all the major stuff. And Carl's got a tip here in a little bit that I think will help our listeners as well. Okay, and we have a couple of quick picks of the week here. So I have an Azure pick of the week, which is an Azure Managed Disks Deep Dive, Lessons Learned and Benefits. So this is a guy that's actually part of my team. So he wrote up, he was using Azure Managed Disks, which is this awesome new feature where basically the disks are managed for you. You don't have to worry about like the underlying blob storage. It handles like fault domains and scaling and performance and things like that. So check out his blog post. It's super informative. We've had a couple of his blog posts referenced before on the show. He actually had the product team reach out and say, "This is awesome. We love the work that you did around this." And then Carl, what do you have for the app of the week?
The app of the week, I've been doing a lot with IoT and then specifically like creating just breadboarded out devices. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when you want to share that, you don't want to take a picture with the rat's nest of wires going everywhere. So if you go to fritzing.org, there's an application that will help you either make a really nice schematic, and this thing looks really nice with the breadboard, or you could actually lay this out as a PCB where you can actually go out and have that printed as well for you. Mm-hmm. So if you have one of those goals where you just want to share what that looks like, we'll have a copy of one of the projects that I'm working on right now in the show notes. But this is a really helpful tool to just share it out. And another thing that you can do with it is if you have an IoT project where you have the code, you're doing Windows 10 IoT Core, check this, make the hardware schematic and check it in with your code so you know that what version of the hardware goes with what version of your code.
Oh, that's a cool idea. Yeah. I love this. This is nice, a nice clean way of seeing all this stuff. Very cool.
That's super cool. When I'm working on breadboards in my engineering, my electrical engineering class was like one of my favorite things. I have a very proud picture of myself in college over my breadboard,
Well, that's cool. That's cool.
It brings me back.
So do you have an electrical engineering degree?
No, I have a CS degree, but
okay.
I had to take an electrical engineering course as part of it.
Oh, I'm jealous that you could do that. That's kind of cool. I didn't have when I did it. We didn't do anything like that. And then Carl, you have a dev tip of the week as well.
Yes, if you go to vs2017poster.azurewebsites.net, there is an infographic style poster of all the highlights of what we talked about and more about Visual Studio 2017. As always, it's very pleasant to look at, and it really helps you get into a lot of just the new features that are out there in a way that you can go dig about, if you want to learn more, you know how to search for it.
Perfect. Had you seen this, Amanda?
Oh, my team just put it together. Yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure. I assumed it was your team that put it together, but it's just on Azure website, so I didn't want to make any assumptions there. So yeah, this is awesome. This is really cool. And it even goes into like the language improvements and even things like that. So.
Yeah, what we were trying to do was to both kind of, show people everything that we've done so that they can know where to dig, but also be kind of more like a reference so that, people will want to keep it up on their wall as they're coding.
Yeah.
One of the things I really like about it is actually at the very bottom of it, it gives you the little icon that says, "Give us your feedback." It's the exact icon in Visual Studio. If you click on that, it'll give your feedback. So I like that reminder that sometimes you see an icon, you're not sure what it does. If you want to hit up the team, that's the way to do it.
And we read every single one. Really.
Awesome. That's great. Awesome. Yeah. Okay, so Amanda, where can people find you?
Probably Twitter is the best. My handle is Amanda K. Silver. K is for Kate.
Okay, perfect. I'm now following you as of 3 seconds ago.
All right. I just got a notification.
Yeah, perfect. And Carl, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Carl Schweitzer.
You can find me at ytechie.com or on Twitter at twitter.com/ytechie. So Amanda, thank you so much for coming on here and talking about all these amazing features and both of your babies. This is such an exciting launch of Visual Studio. So great work.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.